7:08 in the morning, you're listening to Upfront. I'm Jesse Strauss. Schools are meant to create safe and engaging learning environments for all students. The job of teaching not only deals with supporting students emotionally and academically, but also to do as much as possible to keep kids safe. That sometimes means intervening in conflict among students and can end up being a whole social work side of the job, engaging with families so that their kids can be supported holistically. It's a heavy lift, and keeping students safe has grown harder with schools as potential sites for COVID transmission. But how does the idea of keeping schools safe interact with policing? Up until 2 years ago, the Oakland Unified School District had its own police force, a department separate from the city's police and focused only on schools. Today marks the second anniversary of the district's passing of the George Floyd resolution. That resolution committed the district to dismantle its police force entirely by the beginning of 2021. It was one of the material wins of the movement to defund the police in the aftermath of the police killing of George Floyd. We're going to talk this morning about what defunding the school police has meant for students in Oakland and how the school district is reorienting, or trying to make school a safer learning environment for kids. We're joined this morning by a member of the Black Organizing Project, a group that was at the helm of the push to dismantle the Oakland School Police Department. Ebony Johnson worked on the campaign to pass the George Floyd resolution 2 years ago and is a staff organizer with the Black Organizing Project now. Ebony, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's been 2 years today since the Black Organizing Project, along with other organizations, pushed the school district in Oakland to fully dismantle its police department and shift toward restorative justice as a way to keep kids safe. How does it feel 2 years out? How are you celebrating?
I mean, it's definitely a win, a victory that we're acknowledging. It was a 10-year campaign leading up to that. Community really came out. The Black Organizing Project did a lot of work around really grassroots organizing, going into schools, people's neighborhoods, people's homes, and really connecting with people about this issue of safety and, what we want to see for our children in schools. The culmination of that being that there's no more police department in the district it is amazing. It's exactly what we wanted. And we know that there's still more work to come, but definitely a celebration, definitely celebrating with our members, honoring the staff that have been so committed to this for all these years. It's a good feeling.
Well, congratulations. I want to take a little step back to what things looked like before, when there was a school district police force, when it had its own police department. What were the problems with it, and why did it need to be dismantled? I know you did a lot of grassroots organizing and had conversations with your organization's members as well as community members. What was the problem?
The most glaring and tragic problem is the killing of our people. Raheem Brown was murdered by school police back in 2011, I believe. Nothing compares to that. So that definitely is the biggest issue. But, police were involved in disciplinary issues with students, disciplinary issues that should be dealt with by schools, by parents, by other students, inappropriate, punitive discipline, as we know, disproportionately targets Black children, Black students. And so having police present is just the ultimate level of that, and really serves to direct our children to prison. So it's a direct relationship, a direct pathway from the school to prison pipeline. So it also served to keep, there's a lot of, still, as we know, a lot of anti-Black racism culture existing in the school district right now, from, parents not feeling like they're even wanted and welcome on campus, from students still being targeted by teachers, by administrators in an unfair way, in a very racist way. And that kind of behavior has to be dealt with right now. Like, we can't sort of scoot it off to police or even blame police. Now we have to be accountable. Ultimately, it's schools. Schools are supposed to be places of safety, of sanctuary, of education, of thriving. And so we don't want children to feel like they are under attack. We don't want children to feel like they are in jail. So just the culture of that, combining that jail culture with school culture, is inappropriate.
You talked about the school to prison pipeline and also like a punitive approach as opposed to a restorative approach. But I want to just go back to one thing you said. It's hard to stomach how shocking it is to hear that a police department, any police department, but particularly a police department that's specifically set up for school sites, actually killed a young man at a school site.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the case or the life of Raheem Brown Jr.?
Raheem Brown was a 20-year-old young man who was sitting in a car with a significant other and was shot multiple times by police. Police lied and said he was a threat, but that turned out not to be true. He was not armed, was not pointing any weapons at anyone, was not a threat, but was murdered, and there was no accountability for that. Despite community coming out in the masses and demanding justice was not served. So the Black Organizing Project, being an organization that's dedicated to the empowering of our community, Black community, we know that it is, our responsibility to take care of one another and also hold systems accountable. And so that is a call that we don't take lightly, and absolutely felt compelled to work with the community to address the injustice of that, and ultimately get rid of police, eliminate the police from the school district.
And congratulations again. Today is 2 years to the day of the passing of the George Floyd resolution, which determined a complete dismantling of the Oakland Unified School District police force. You talked about punitive measures and you talked about the school to prison pipeline. It's been 2 years since the George Floyd resolution. You also said that it is your call as the Black Organizing Project to take care of one another and also hold systems accountable. What does school safety look like now? And what is the vision that you all are working with in terms of keeping students safe and supporting safe spaces without police?
Yeah. Well, formerly, the school security officers reported to the school police department, and we're also trained by the school police department, but that is shifted. Those positions are now, they've been repurposed as culture keepers, culture and climate ambassadors, recognizing that safety is really about what kind of culture is upheld at the school, a culture of education, academic excellence, a culture of valuing young people as whole beings, a culture of recognizing the healing that needs to take place as there's lots of trauma that happens in our communities, a culture of learning about who we are and being proud of that. And so culture keepers, culture and climate ambassadors being tasked with supporting the development of this culture and really being guides to uplift this versus being seen as bodies to police students. So that's one. There's also another position that was created, the coordinator of safety, who is responsible for really making sure that the sort of new direction around creating safety and like a healthy culture in schools is being adhered to. The call was really around taking those resources, that funding that the police department was receiving, and redirecting that money into resources that the community called for. So certainly more mental health resources, counselors, therapists, social workers, absolutely, restorative, transformative justice practices and interventions, anti-racist trainings, trainings around, emotional intelligence, relationship building, cultural accountability. Also, investing in the positions of culture keepers, culture and climate ambassadors who really are at the front line of working with our young people, trying to keep them safe, like at school and the community. And so, really also advocating for them to be compensated more fairly, as well as, their voices being heard. I mean, they have a lot of perspective about what's happening and what needs to happen. And so instead of, sort of looking at this sort of top-down approach to decision-making, wanting to make sure that there is a more equitable framework around how we're looking at what needs to be happening on school campuses, and to that end, having a part of the resolution is called for a community-driven process. So to decision making. So instead of heads of departments sort of like making decisions kind of in an abstract, sort of arbitrary way about what kinds of safety measures need to be happening on campuses. So these are just some of the measures. We have a police accountability working group, which is tasked with meeting with district officials every week to check on tracking data, like how many police calls have been made, what were the incidents that led up to that. We're tracking suspension and expulsion data. We have safety plans that all of the schools were tasked with filling out to sort of identify what resources they have in place and what ones they don't, so that we can then, fill those gaps with the resources that should be available, are available for the new direction of safety that we're taking.
One of the things you mentioned kind of, to my mind, cuts at the heart of the movement to defund police, which sometimes got very misunderstood publicly, that defunding is not only about removing resources from police departments, but specifically to redistribute and use those resources to work toward safety in ways that don't rely on violence. You talked about some of the things that the school district is needing to do according to the George Floyd resolution. I know you also talked about how the Black Organizing Project is involved in tracking those resources. And I'm wondering what you all have learned. How is the district actually doing? Is that money that was going to the police department now being shifted over? And are there still police calls being made from schools?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it is a process. It is not cut and dried, remove the police department and now everything's good. There's a whole, we're in a phase of implementation. There's a whole process of accountability. There's a whole process of restructuring. And so that is in process, and it is difficult, very difficult work. One of the things that you mentioned was about the police calls, so there are still police calls being made. There are some laws where police are still mandated to be called. One of the things that we did to track this and also try to minimize how many police calls were made was creating a police-free guidance, which sort of lays out the emergency reasons why, police typically need to be notified. But we also created areas on this guidance that identified some of the most common reasons why police have been called in the past and what are some alternatives. Like, how do you address situations of conflict or alleged crisis without involving police now? And so that has been delivered to all of the administrators, all of the schools, and we started the school year off doing trainings about this police-free guidance, sort of taking schools, principals through this, and some folks are like ready to adopt it and are on board, and others are not. Other administrators are upset that they don't have the kind of free reign to call police at will like they used to. And so it has definitely been work around trying to move some of those people. It's definitely been work around, holding those people accountable and really putting pressure on the administrators that are tasked with holding those administrators accountable, those principals accountable, Yeah, but, I think because of the police free guidance, there's a discipline matrix also that was produced and put out that really laid out sort of what are appropriate interventions for discipline. I think that in tandem with the trainings, in tandem with the regular police accountability working group meeting and asking difficult questions and putting pressure on district officials to follow through and as well as to do things differently, all of that has resulted, in there was a 90% decrease in police calls. And so that That says a lot. That's great, and we're definitely honoring that as a victory, as well as know that there's more work to be done. And so that work continues. As far as the resources are concerned, the money, I mean, it's been tough. There's systems of bureaucracy, white supremacy are entrenched. And so it has not been simple to say, okay, these monies are no longer going here. Now we're going to put them all here. There's been, to some extent, like a lack of transparency around how the budget process works. There hasn't been clarity around who is responsible for creating a budget when, so there also was confusion about if the monies were to be ongoing or not. We were told recently that the monies these were one-time funds, the funds that was left over from the police department being disbanded this past school year, that it's just, they're one time. But that all turns out not to be true. The superintendent did clarify for the board and for everyone that this money is to be recurring, and that there is a budget necessary to be created, and that money, the money for the resources that we deem that the community says needs to be invested in, the district will have to find that money. So, we're in the process of identifying what exactly the community is saying they want to see at these schools, what the schools are saying that they need. And then from there, community will make a budget, a people's budget, to determine what that should look like. And, then we'll see what happens with the district. Will the district accept this budget that community comes up with, or will the district reject it and try to fight us? And that is yet to be revealed. But it is being told that that there is funds available, and that they are to be recurring and ongoing.
How are you seeing this play out beyond Oakland? Are other communities having similar conversations and organizing processes to end police departments in schools?
It's very obvious that the presence of police that doesn't equate to safety. It equates to control in a lot of ways, and to more tragedy, and that there's evidence to support that. I think people are very clear that it's particularly for Black and brown and poor neighborhoods, our schools are not doing well, and police presence is not supporting our schools thriving. What is it that our communities, what is it that our schools, our neighborhood schools are needing in order for our young people to do well, to be healthy, to thrive, to be successful, to have an opportunity at being creative, carving out a path for themselves? Like, what are the indicators of that? And we know, like, healthy relationships with caring adults is a big deal. We know exposure to resources, new opportunities, travel. We know economic resources, jobs, job trainings, career pathways. These are some of the types of supports that communities need in order to thrive. And so I think people are wanting to put their energy into actually what is safety, instead of just sort of like accepting the false narrative that having police, with guns in a very coercive relationship with people, that equates to safety, recognizing that isn't true, that the truth of the matter is that the things that we as parents think of as safety for our children are the same things that schools need for those children. And so it's reimagining what safety is at schools, I think, is something that is a much more popular theme across the nation now.
Again, for our listeners, today is the 2-year anniversary of when the George Floyd resolution was passed in the Oakland Unified School District. That was a resolution that dismantled the Oakland Unified School District's own police department entirely. Congratulations on that. We're speaking with Ebony Johnson, who's a staff organizer with the Black Organizing Project, the organization that was at the helm of that movement. Last question. What campaigns and what other work is the Black Organizing Project involved with now?
The Black Organizing Project is focused right now on really listening to community. The overall name is Black Sanctuary. And so we're in the process of really going out into community, at schools and neighborhoods, listening to parents, listening to students. What are their experiences, post the GFR resolution being passed and implemented? What are their experiences with safety, both in school and outside of school? And how do we then turn that into not only demands of, systems that need to be accountable like the schools, but also create Black sanctuary blueprints for our communities? How do we ourselves work toward building the kinds of, refuge that we want to see? And so we are in the process of really supporting parents and developing a Black parent union to address certainly issues that are going on in schools, but even beyond, what are issues that parents as a constituency, like as a group, what are issues that impact parents, specifically Black parents, that they can come together on and support one another around. Likewise, initiating, supporting Black student unions as well. And hopefully, being able to create a larger solidarity certainly across Oakland, but, even beyond, of Black parents, Black students being empowered to assert what it is that they're needing, what they're wanting, as it relates to Black sanctuary. And so that's primarily what our work is focused on, at the moment.
Well, Ebony Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations to yourself as well as the rest of the organization, the Black Organizing Project, celebrating 2 years today from passing the George Floyd resolution.
Thank you.